Well, greetings. Welcome to the Global Church Podcast. And my name is Jim Poole. And today we have with us Mike Thomas.
Good afternoon.
So happy to have you with us. First time.
Yeah, first time.
Right.
Got the nervous shakes.
Okay. Well, we can't tell. So
Okay.
Must not be too bad. Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us, Mike. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So Mike is a long time member of our missions team, our missions committee here at FBC. Approximately, how many miles have you flown? How many trips have you taken?
Not as many as you guys, but just over a longer period of time.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm still trying to play catch up, but I'm not going to win that race.
Yeah, thousands and thousands of miles,
Yes.
for sure.
Yes.
And 40 trips, something like that.
A month?
A lot. No, I mean total.
Oh,
A lot.
many trips.
Yeah, many trips. Yeah. Yeah. So
Probably well over 20 just to Kenya alone.
right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
So what we want to do today is we want to focus on Kenya. And we want to focus particularly on the Pokot people group that we've been involved with for a long time. Some of y'all remember David, James, and Zacchaeus. They've been here a number of times through the years. They were just here at our last missions conference, and they were here with their wives.
yes.
And so we want to focus our time today talking about the Pokot work. And it's a really big work. There's a lot going on in that work. So what we thought we would do is give a little brief history and just kind of walk through what's transpired through the number of years and then what's going on in the past year or so of what God is doing over there. And you've been there, as you said, Kenya 20 times through the years. So give us a little bit of a history of the Pokot work, how we initially got involved, and a little bit of background.
Sure. We first got involved with the Pokot through Julius Mergor, who is a Pokot man who was here in the States studying. We got involved with him in the late 80s and made our first trip to Pokot, Kenya in 1994. Yes, that was the first trip.
Okay.
And particularly, they had begun the work by training evangelists to go out among their tribe to take the gospel out to the people in the whole reaches of their tribe. Pokot is about the size of the state of Maryland, not the same shape, but about the same size. And then they also have Pokot in other states nearby. So that gives you an idea of the size of it, but the terrain and such, much more unforgiving than we have here in the States. And so getting around is much more difficult.
Yeah, they have a rainy season and a dry season. And so when the rains come, roads get really bad, super slippery,
Yes.
really bad ruts.
Mm-hmm.
We've got the privilege of having our paved roads, super nice, smooth roads where we go 60, 70, 80 miles an hour.
You can't do that there.
They're on motorcycles or foot,
Right.
or maybe a four-wheel drive vehicle, but
Yeah.
much different trying to get from one location to another in Pokot.
Yes. And so the Pokot people are spread out
Yeah.
all through this area in little villages or bands, some of them are nomadic.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But yeah, as they progressed through the years, they went from 8 churches in all of Pokot to 80 churches. Now they're, I think, well over 200.
Okay.
If my memory serves me right. And what Julius Mergor asked us to do was to come and help train their leaders because they really had no depth to the training. as they were mainly just training evangelists and few pastors. So we began to go over and to meet with the pastors and begin to train them in the scriptures. And then later in the 90s and early 2000s, Scott McManigal started coming with us as well. This was Tim and me and others who were going before that. But Scott introduced to us the idea of teaching foundationally and progressively through the scriptures. And we saw the wisdom in that and began to do that. So then later, early in, I forget exactly what year it was, but in the mid-2000s, we met with the leadership again, and they assigned 4 young pastors, or 3 young pastors and 1 semi-young pastor, to work with us. And we, with the long dialogue, basically, of when we were there meeting with them, they understood what the vision was as far as training leaders to establish leadership that could then establish other leaders, pastors, that could establish their churches throughout the land, rather than just sending 1 or 2 people to preach the gospel here and there. So the goal was to establish the churches throughout the Pokot area. And these 4 men, Zacchaeus, David, James, and a man named Job, who has since gone home to be with the Lord, they really came up with that vision on how that would be accomplished. And that's what's going on today.
Okay. That's great. That's great. So initially the work began, and it, as any work, has to begin with just evangelism. You have to get the word out. So that's what they were doing. They were sharing the gospel in various areas. I've heard Julius say it. I've heard it repeated that early on the work was described as a mile wide and an inch deep. So there was a lot of evangelism going on, but there wasn't much Bible teaching coming behind the evangelism. And so that's where when FBC partnered, that's really what we got to be able to strengthen, to begin to pour into, help to train and strategize, and how to begin to deepen the teaching in the churches and in the area that this evangelism in the Pokot area was going on. So we had the opportunity to just partner with these 4 guys, train them so that they will in turn be able to train others who will be able to get the teaching out to the churches, to the local areas, get down to the grassroots, to the people that are coming to the church. They can actually hear Bible teaching, and not just evangelism over and over and over and over again, but actually hear the word of God taught.
Yes, that was the vision. It still is the vision, and it's what's been going on. Each of these, the 3 of them who are now still involved with this, had grown up in the ministry. They become believers early on. They were students who would come to the student retreats once a year, and then when they graduated, they believe they all went off to Bible school and were trained in Bible school. But as they say, you get so much education there, but it's not everything.
Sure.
And so they really appreciate the partnership that they have with us to, over the long haul, study through the scriptures and do that progressively, so that when the message is preached, when the other pastors are taught, when then the congregations are taught, they have a firm foundation of understanding of the scriptures, the character of God, not just the thoughts of men.
Right. Yeah, so we've talked about that on previous podcast, whether it's the previous trip we were on in Togo, where we had taught through a lot of material, Malawi, where we're also in the same progression of teaching through foundationally and chronologically. So what we're doing in Malawi, what we're doing in Togo, the same thing is happening in Kenya,
Yes.
where they're teaching progressively and foundationally and chronologically. Yeah. Okay. So if the Pokot area is not in the same shape as the state of Maryland, but we all have a general idea in terms of the size of Maryland, how are they tackling that area with as a difficult area as it is to get around in? What have they done to try to get to the area and get to all the churches?
Yes. Well, at first, their plan was to divide the whole state and parts of Uganda, because there are Pokot people over in Uganda as well. And in East Pokot, which is not a state, but they also have Pokot there. Their plan was to divide it up into 4 sections so that each of them would take the section and go and teach. And tried that for a number of years, and it made some progress, but soon came to realize that they were getting burned out and not being able to reach as many people. I mean, the goal being to establish the entire, all the churches in those regions. And with up to 200 some churches now, that's a lot of work for 4 guys to do. So after a few years of that, they then began to realize what we need to do is train trainers, not just train the pastors, but to train the trainers who will teach the pastors. And so then you have more people involved in that task and getting out to the people. And the other change that they're still working on somewhat, and they understand this better than we do, obviously. Do you go to them, or do you bring all these people to one location? And we thought it would be good, bring them to your location, and you can teach them there, and then send them back. Sometimes that works, but it's more often easier and better, more effective to go out to a specific location and gather the pastors from around that area. No, they're not all from that one town, perhaps, but to gather them into that area and teach them there, rather than bringing them all the way back to Kapangoria.
Okay, so I heard you mention 200 churches, or over 200 churches.
I believe that's the case.
That's roughly the number, give or take a little bit.
Yeah.
Wow, so these...
It's probably more than that.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
So these guys are looking to train and develop the leaders so that all the pastors of all these churches are going through the lessons. And so all the churches are being taught by that local pastor as best as possible, systematically and chronologically through the scriptures of 200, give or take a little bit, churches. That's a daunting task.
A daunting task.
Wow.
Huge. But they're making progress.
Yeah. So if they tried that, made some progress, but wasn't the best because it was trying to bring people to them. But now they are gathering people in certain areas. So what did they do? What was the next step that they took to try to make some progress in a work that's really large and with so many churches?
Right. Well, one of the first tasks to do was to translate the material from English into Pokot.
Okay. And
that took a number of years. But they didn't wait till they were done to start. So they've been working on that, and they've got a lot of that translated. Because most of these local pastors, even though English is quite often spoken throughout Kenya, not all the pastors understand English. And certainly not most of the Pokot understand English. They understand maybe some Swahili. So a lot of things have been translated into Swahili, but then they also have translated into Pokot so that the people out in the villages really understand what the scriptures are saying to them. So there was that work that had to go on. But what these 3 guys have really come to realize is they need to train their Timothys, who will turn around and teach others also, who can then pass it on to the fourth generation in that regard. And that's what's going on. So they're now focusing on going out to these areas and gathering the teachers of teachers to train them.
Okay. Yeah. So have they divided the area up into sections when you say go out into these areas? Have they split it up into areas or kind of regions based on?
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's a couple different of the areas. Pokot is a province of Kenya, a governmental geographic area.
Okay.
And so headquarters, Kapenguria, is really toward the southern end of that, kind of near the border with another state, another province. And so there's that whole area around Kapenguria. That's kind of like one of the divisions. There's further north up toward the border with Turkana and such. That's also another region. But there's a significant amount of Pokot over across the border into Uganda. And so that's also a region. And then again, like toward the east is East Pokot, which is part of another province. It's not a province by itself. And another tribe that's there is called the Mariquet. East Pokot and Pokot, it's the same language but a different dialect. So they understand each other, but they don't necessarily, I mean, immediately they know that you're from one place or the other.
Right.
And lately they've been having difficulties, not our brothers and sisters, but the East Pokot tribe has been having difficulties with the neighboring Mariquet. And so they haven't been able to go there and continue the teaching because of the disputes that have been going on.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
but those are kind of like the four areas in which they're working.
Okay. So we've gotten some reports, so to speak, emails from Zacchaeus and James and David.
Yes.
And they've given us kind of a snapshot of what the Lord's been doing in that area and in those areas in 2019.
Yes.
And so talk to us a little bit about the progression, things that we've seen God doing, things within developing of the leaders, things within raising up of these Timothys, like what you're saying.
Right.
Talk to us a little bit about, just what things do we see God doing there?
Sure. Well, first of all, the whole concept of teaching progressively and chronologically and foundationally, it took a long time for that to even sink in. So having translated creation to Christ into Swahili and then even into Pokot, took some time to teach it and for people to be pastors and folks to even be interested in it. But slowly it began to, the benefit of it began to catch on. And so in a number of these places where the teams have gone, they have now progressed through the creation of Christ, for believers positioned in Christ, as we call it, and then into Acts and Romans and into Ephesians now. Right. So a number of these places, they're at different places, there are different progress in that progression, but it took a while for that to actually catch on. And now it's really being understood, the benefit of it, and so they're making progress.
Okay. So in December, we were in Malawi. In February, we were in Togo. And Malawi they're at a different spot in the progression and the teaching than where Togo is. So that's two different countries there within Africa. And so within the country of Kenya, there are the Pokot, and within the Pokot, there are these different groups, and they are all also at different spots in the teaching.
Yes.
And so it's all going on, but they're all at different spots. Yeah, that's really interesting. You think about it, different countries around the world where we're working, where God would have different countries and different people at different spots in
Right.
progressively teaching through and understanding His Word. But when you think about in one country, in one people group, in one country, it's encouraging. It's amazing to me to see God doing that work of just establishing, communicating, growing these people in His Word. But it's different for different groups and different for different people. So why aren't they all at the same spot? If there's these different groups, why wouldn't they all be like take the Lokpa? They're all teaching through and progressing through together. So why would these different groups, locations be at different spots?
There's a couple of different reasons for that. The Lokpa are relatively close to one another. It's easy to get to one another. I forget how much they get together, once every other month, I believe it is.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's fairly easy for them to do that. That'd be like getting everybody together from Baltimore, maybe.
Right.
I don't know. But the Pokot, they're spread out much further. It's much more difficult to travel. So you can't get everybody together all at once and teach them all at once, which is what the Lokpa do. They study together. So instead, you've got to go out to these different places, places like Kodich.
What about literacy? Are all the Pokot literate in terms able to read the lessons, or some of them not able to read the lessons, or does that come into play with?
Certainly not.
Okay.
And actually, some of the evangelists aren't literate either.
Okay.
But there's been a miracle that's actually taken place where the lessons and the scriptures have been translated into Pokot, and these illiterate evangelists have been able to almost immediately read Pokot.
Wow.
Before they could even understand the Swahili or certainly English. So with very little training, they were able to pick up the Pokot lessons, read it and understand it, and teach it. I don't understand how that happened.
That's amazing. Yeah.
But it's like a miracle.
They have a Pokot Bible?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. All right.
I may just be New Testament, but I think it's both Old and New.
Okay. All right. Wow, that's wonderful that they'd be able to have that literacy to read through the scriptures, what they have, and then read through the lessons that they have. That's great that God would do that for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what about he's talked about the Timothys. So in terms of the establishment of the churches, you were there 2 years ago or last year?
I think it was last year.
Yeah.
Early.
You visited a church or two while you were there. You and Scott and Jackie and Karen went. Talk to us about how do the churches seem, and the establishment of the faith of the people in the churches, and then these Timothys. What change do we and growth and change in people's lives, personally on the location, do we see God doing?
Yeah, and that's it's varied in different places,
Sure.
but certainly as the pastors get grounded in the Word and are teaching, the congregation has appreciated that, I guess is the best way to put it. They're understanding the scriptures and receiving it. Some of the testimonies that we've heard in different places, well, first of all, I should back up and say that the Pokot people, as many of the tribes in that area, are warriors, and they fight with one another. And so some of the young men, that's their identity, is that they are warriors. And at times, well, in one place in particular, the church was having church service, and this warrior came in, sat down, and
Not from their church.
not from their
Not
church.
from their area.
He,
from
no, he was just traveling.
Okay.
And he was there basically to demand some food and some things. But eventually they actually got to share the gospel with him, and he became a believer.
Wow.
And he realized that his lifestyle basically was not God's way. And he has gone back to his home area out in the bush, I mean, much further than we have been, but has taken that message to other warriors. And they are asking some of these Timothys to go out and teach them. So the overall societal impact that the Pokot are seeing is one more toward peace with their neighbors, peace among each other, because the gospel has come and has had that effect on people.
Awesome.
So,
wow, that's great.
yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So I hear you saying as well that not only are there these areas that we're talking about, but there also is a growing number of areas that are wanting people to come and teach.
Yes.
And so it's like us, this is going to be, I'm going to try it for an example. It might not work, but I'm just, context are going to be different, obviously. We're looking to start a church, down in Shenandoah County. Okay. We're planning to do that later this year. So it comes with its excitement, but also challenges.
Right.
So what if all of a sudden, there was someone in Loudoun County that said, hey, FBC, come start a church in Loudoun County. And then somebody in Clark County said, hey, FBC, come start a church in Clark County. And all these different areas.
Yeah, that's
were
happening.
Calling the office and saying, hey, come start a church in our area.
Yes.
We would feel that as like, whoa, like, how are we going to do that?
Right.
It's an impossibility for us to do that. Is that similar for what Zacchaeus and David and James and their Timothys are feeling when these people are saying, hey, come out to our location?
That is one of the tensions that they feel. And it's not just their location. It's not just the Pokot. That is happening. I mean, they keep getting requests, keep getting new requests. Please come out and train us. Please come out and teach us. And that's, as that began more and more, these three guys in particular realized we need to train trainers. And that's, that's where the Jacksons came in, the Simons, and a number of these guys who were out now taking the message. Francis, Solomon, they're all being trained by James, David, and Zacchaeus, and are doing that because also, like the neighboring tribe of Mariquet, there are believers now who are brothers and sisters in the Lord with our Pokot friends, and they are meeting together, and they see the difference that the gospel is making and the scriptures are making in the lives of the Pokot.
Yeah.
So they want the Pokot to come and teach them.
Right.
And they've begun to do that. Their next step is to be translating the lessons into Mariquet, into their language. That also happened near Kapinkoria. There's another tribe called the Sengwer. Mm-hmm. And a number of years ago, they came to these guys and said, hey, we have heard this being preached. We see the difference it's making. You have to come and teach us. And now there's a couple Timothys among them who have translated a number of the lessons and are being trained to teach their pastors as well.
Yeah.
And this also happens. I'm not sure it's happening with the Turkana, but there are a couple other tribes where it's beginning to have that impact across tribal borders. So,
That's amazing. So the message is being communicated, lives are being changed, the changed lives are being seen, and then other people are seeing the changed lives and then wanting them to come share that for themselves. So,
Yes.
And for them in their location.
Yes.
So clearly, God's doing an amazing work there. Yeah. With such a large number of churches that it's hard for us to sit here and to comprehend.
It's hard for me who's been there 20 times to comprehend.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Talk a little bit about, there are other areas where we are involved in Kenya. So share a little bit about how the Pokot leadership team has been able to, partner with some other areas where we are at work in Kenya that we might not have, that are newer than the Pokot. Share a little bit about that.
Sure. Everywhere that we're working in Kenya is newer than the Pokot.
Right.
Originally, we met a guy over in Asia at Asian Christian Academy in India who was a Kenyan, and we got connected with him, and he went back to Kenya, and we began working with him in his village. That's Philip Ochieng.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the early on things we began to do was to have joint conferences with the church from Migori and with the Pokot. We'd meet in the middle. One of the key guys who was in the church in Migori was actually from an area where the tribe there is called the Luo, and in a town called Webuye. He was working in Migori, and at one point, God decided to take him back to Webuye, and so we got introduced to this small group of believers there as well. The Lord then saw fit to take him home to be with him. He got hit by a bus and was killed. His widow and a couple of the young guys there in Webuye kept the church going and asked for help and training, and Philip and the guys from Migori helped out quite a bit, and we began meeting with them as well. And the Pokot would come down and meet with the guys from Webuye, study together, do evangelism together or open air preaching together.
Mm-hmm.
And so the church there in Webuye is actually very strong now. It's not wide like the Pokot. It's one church, but it's very well established on their way to really being quite grounded as a church. And then they've had an impact.
Mm-hmm.
They've actually reached out. Well, no, they didn't reach out. Others have reached out to them.
Right.
From what's the big tribe we always hear in the movies and such? Oh my goodness, I forget. The folks closer to Nairobi, the ones that were part of the, they live in the game reserve and such. Oh, I can't believe I can't remember their names. But they've reached out to William and the people there in Webuye and said, please come and teach us this. Mm-hmm. Teach us how to teach this way to our people.
Right.
We were connected with a pastor in Simon in Nairobi through a contact from one of our people here at FBC.
Mm-hmm.
So now he has gone out and sat under the teaching with the Pokot and with the Webuye church. And they have gone and actually to his church in Nairobi and taught there. So this outreach, this helping to establish the local church is not just us and them, it's now them and them as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that really communicates that they are doing it on their own and that they're not dependent upon us to do it. And so they gather, what Zacchaeus and James and Dave and those guys are doing, like with the Pokot, but then they're also getting together and helping with William and helping with like with Simon, and they're all intergrowing and helping and working together.
Yes.
And so it's a wonderful thing. Sometimes, I mean, we don't go over there all that often, but they get together far more often than when we go.
Yes.
And so there's this Kenyan connection, so to speak, with all the brothers and sisters that FBC is partnered with in global
Yes.
missions. Yeah,
Yes.
It's a wonderful thing. Yeah, yep. Anything else you want to share about those guys and what God's doing over there?
Well, every time I talk with them and every time we meet with them and such, they just are always wanting to express their thanks to God for FBC. And so the folks here, please know that you are a vital part of that ministry and have been for years and years, and hopefully for years and years to come. It takes a lot to make those trips. It takes a lot to help them make those trips internally to the country. They can't afford that on their own.
Right.
We have to fund that, and it is having a long-lasting eternal impact.
Right.
So
yeah, enduring relationships is one of our core values, and been involved in them for a long time, and lives are being changed. And yeah, the day's going to come when we're with all those folks
yes.
that have been impacted, and we will all be together in glory. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Looking forward to that.
That's right. Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
All right. Thanks, Jim.
Pokot. Also wanted to mention that all of us are aware of the coronavirus that's happening right now globally. And Scott and I were supposed to go to Malawi on Sunday, this coming Sunday. And we decided not to take that trip or to take any trips in the immediate future until we see this virus resolved. And you actually, as well, were taking a trip to
Ecuador. Part of the decision, yes, we don't want to increase the possibility of contracting the virus, but that may or may not happen. But what might be more of a reality is you get somewhere and then there's a travel ban put.
Right.
And either you get back to the States and have to be on 2-week quarantine, or you get quarantined over there. Now, Malawi is a nice place. That'd be okay. If I was in Ecuador, I wouldn't mind it at all.
Yeah.
Lots of chocolate there to
right.
pass the time with.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just wanted to, let you guys know that it's affecting us, and our, obviously what we do is global and international and involves a lot of traveling. So the Lord just led the church and the leadership of the church to say, hey, let's just sit tight for the time being, and no need to risk something that might not, need to happen. And
right.
So next week, though, what we're going to do is we're actually going to communicate through WhatsApp as best we can with the team that's going to be over there. They're going to be teaching through 1 Corinthians. And so we're going to take advantage of some of the different communication platforms that we have to still be a part of things over there, but not necessarily be on site.
Right.
And yeah, it's going to be neat to see how that develops and how that works. So, yeah, moving forward.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks for listening. Have a great rest of the week.